Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. So it does look like the Houthis, it does look like the Yemenis are now involved in this conflict, this global crisis. Last night, or this morning, I guess, there were missile attacks that went into Israel. Now, this is a conflict that's spreading fast. Another country is involved. What I'm going to do in this live stream, I'm going to let people know, how this is going to affect, first of all, the conflict in the Middle East, which is not good. The Israelis don't have the legs to deal with this, and that's nothing against the Israelis. They just don't have the hardware to deal with this. The United States military don't have the manpower to deal with Iran and Yemen simultaneously. So that does look like the Americans need more manpower. That does look like US conscription. And here on the streets of the United Kingdom, this is just another dividing line. So we've got all these conflicts now that are happening simultaneously. But listen, don't worry, guys, because if you're looking to the Middle East and thinking, oh my God, that's so bad, but at least British troops are safe. No, don't worry, because very soon, potentially next weekend, we are looking like a huge escalation in Ukraine that's going to drag the British troops in there. So let me caveat this before I start, guys. Okay, so this is a developing situation. I'm going to give my opening monologue on this. It's going to be a short one. And then I'm going to jump onto the live updates from Al Jazeera. Now, I'm going to go, excuse me. The reason I go with Al Jazeera is because they get the information quicker. It's not, and it is a little bit slanted. It is a little bit biased. However, they do get that info. And when things are happening in the Middle East, Al Jazeera will, I've been doing this a while. Al Jazeera will get that information out quicker, like maybe 10, 15 minutes quicker than everybody else, so they're usually the first ones. Now, they will have a slant on that, but, everyone's got a slant on it. So to get the information as quickly to you guys as possible, I will be going from Al Jazeera. Right, let's just get on with this, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share my stuff, guys. Actually, last night when we was on the live stream, Googleinos threw a comment up there. He said, Sean, there's an announcement in 15 minutes by the Houthis. So we watched the announcement, and the Houthis said, if you guys were on last night, and the Houthis said, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to do this. And then I said, listen, guys, they're going to definitely join this conflict now. And you've got to understand the direction of travel now. You've got to understand that more countries get involved. Look, the United States, they're the biggest, they're the baddest. They don't have enough men. That's the reality. In fact, let me turn that light on. So the United States just do not have enough military to deal with Iran and Yemen simultaneously. The Israelis, they don't have the force projection to deal with the Yemenis simultaneously. So now it's looking like the tides are turning, right? The tides are turning. Right, let's just start with this monologue, guys. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just so when you thought the crisis in the Middle East, have you seen the oil price as well? Guys, I'll say this again. I keep saying this. This has been, you guys can understand. You guys know that I know what I'm talking about, right? People know what they're talking about because they don't change their mind. They say, right, this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. And then they don't change their mind. They don't flim-flammer, and they stick by it. Now, early on in this conflict, when it started, before it started, and I was telling you guys exactly when it would start, I said, when those first airstrikes go in, just fill your tanks up with petrol or diesel, and I that is still solid advice, guys. Yes, if you've got the ability, go and buy a Bowser and, do all the rest of it. Dig a bunker if you've got the money and put, 3 years food and buy a farm. I understand most people don't have that capacity. what you do have the capacity to do is go and fill your tank up, right? That is like my go-to advice for everyone right now. And also, when that when the petrol stations run dry, you disconnect your battery and you don't take your car anywhere, right? Because your car's then not for social, it's for emergencies. Now, so just when we thought the Middle East couldn't get any more dangerous, the Yemen has Yemenis Iran-backed Houthis have officially officially entered the war. Early this morning, or last night, depending on what time zone you're on, Israeli air defense intercepted ballistic missiles launched from Yemen. Missile alerts sounded across southern and central Israel. Houthi military spokesperson, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. Well, I am. Yahya Sari. Yahasari! I don't know. Maybe that's what you say when you're on a horse. Yahasari quickly claimed responsibility, saying they fired a barrage of ballistic missiles targeting sensitive Israeli military sites in southern Israel, including areas near Beersheba, I think that's the pronunciation, and even close to Israel's new main nuclear reactor. This is a major escalation. Until now, the Houthis have stayed largely on the sidelines of the current Iran-Israel-United States conflict. No longer. Their leader had warned just days ago that their fingers are on the trigger and they are not neutral. Today, they proved it. For us here if you live in the United Kingdom, I'll jump onto the live updates in a second, guys, okay? If you live in the United Kingdom, and I do, this matters deeply. Any widening fighting raises the risk of renewed Houthi attacks on the Red Sea. And from yesterday, we can pretty much assume right now that shipping in the Red Sea is closed. You know, just even if it's not happened officially, there's that little 20 kilometer, maybe, I don't know how long it is, maybe 20, 30 kilometer patch between Yemen and Djibouti. And the Houthis are quite capable of closing that down, guys. They've done it before. So I would say for now, you know, just accept that I think it's called the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the Djibouti Strait. It's easier to understand. It's easier to say. Now, that's critical choke point for goods heading towards Europe. So it's not just oil now. This is goods. So I keep saying this, all your cheap stuff, you know, all this cheap stuff you get like from, and it is cheap, your cheap stuff from, I don't know, not IKEA, I don't know, B&M, Home Bargains, I think Morrison's have got an aisle, you know, all this cheap stuff that's just mass imported from China. Expect that to be one, an order of magnitude more expensive, and two, gone. I know some of you, my guys, might not, you know, it might not bother some of you guys because you guys might shop at Harrods. But all that stuff now, it either has to get stopped or it has to go all the way around Africa, which is going to be, which is a considerable more, you know, which is a considerably higher cost, right? Now, we've seen this before, how this sends global prices rocketing, pushing up petrol, diesel, heating, the weekly shop. That's all happening again because now there are those two choke points. So it's not just the oil leaving the Strait of Hormuz, it's now all the stuff going through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been warning about the conflict on two fronts, and he's been talking about the conflict in Ukraine. And remember, guys, okay, I've been saying that I feel that this is going to come back online next weekend. Now, from my analysis, you know, and there are other intelligence groups, and you know. And other people looking at this, and defense analysts, that's the word I was looking for. They're watching nervously about the potential escalation in Ukraine or in Estonia. I've shared this with you guys a few times. So I do feel that that's going to happen. It could happen as soon as next week. It has to happen soon. Now, the reason I'm saying it could happen next week, first of all, you've got a lot of things happening next weekend. It's Good Friday. Ministers and politicians in the United Kingdom are all away. They're all, they've got their phones turned off. It's a lot easier to get things done when Parliament are not in office. It's a lot easier to deploy troops when it's an emergency situation. It's a lot easier to do these things if you don't have parliamentary oversight. So, for example, if there was some sort of, deployment, and I think that, guys, look, at this point, as far as I'm concerned, a full-scale British deployment to Ukraine or Estonia fighting the Russians, it's inevitable. It's just a question of when. Now, if you want to do that and give it parliamentary process, then Keir Starmer would have to say, next Wednesday, I propose we deploy boots on the ground to Ukraine or whatever. This is what we're going to do. This is the paperwork. Let's all read through it and let's all have a vote. It's never going to get through. It's never going to get passed. Never going to get passed. However, if this happens as an emergency, oh no, NATO country's been attacked, we need to get boots on the ground quick to save lives and whatever. It's done then, right? Once it's done, it's done. So a wise man once told me, it's better to ask for forgiveness than easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? So once the boots on the ground, you can't call them back. So we are looking at that possible escalation next weekend in Ukraine or potentially Estonia. Like I said, guys, okay, whenever it happens, Russia's been ramping up hybrid actions in Eastern Europe. There are growing fears that Moscow could test the West's resolve even further. And we know that in that event, the United States have already signaled so obviously. Like, you can see these signals. You can see these signals. How many times has Donald Trump come out and said, we don't need NATO, but when we needed them, they weren't there. And, how many times has he put things like, NATO were not there when we needed them. We don't need anyone. We're the United States, but we will remember this critical point in time. Like, he's put so many of those posts out. It's a clear signal that this is going to happen, and the United States are going to say, oh, TikTok takoi divide ospedania, which is like, no, we're not helping. Now, the United Kingdom already has hundreds of British troops stationed in Estonia as part of NATO's forward defence. So if fighting flares up there, British troops are already deployed. So this is just a bolstering of that, right? Now, whether through limited incursion, hybrid warfare, sabotage, or even worse, those troops could quickly find themselves in the line of fire. Any serious escalation in Ukraine pulls in direct NATO support would almost certainly involve British troops as well. Now, the way things are going to go in Eastern Europe, and I'll come on to the live updates in a second. The way things are going to go in Eastern Europe is as such. There's going to be another separatist movement from this town, and I won't share it on the map at the moment, guys. There'll be another push from the separatists, so the Estonian, the Narva separatists. They will be pushing and they will want independence, and the Russians will say, "Yeah, this has nothing to do with Russia. They're the Estonian separatists. It's nothing to do with us. It's the separatists. They want independence. They're fighting for their independence." They'll have tanks and anti-aircraft weapons, and it will be obvious who supplied them, right? They didn't just, they don't have a teleporting machine. And then how do you deal with that? Like I keep saying, land pirates, asymmetric warfare, marauding gangs. That's what's coming, guys, and it could happen as quickly as next weekend. Right, let me jump onto the so that's what we're looking at the moment. The Houthis are officially now, and the Yemeni Houthis, Yemeni opens up a new front in this conflict. Right, I'm just going to look at the updates from Al Jazeera. Right, give me a sec. Right, the death toll climbs to 5. No, that's Bahrain intercepted. IRGC says it targeted U.S. vessel off Oman's coast. Ukraine President Zelensky lands in Doha. Wow, what's he doing there? Right, there's so much stuff happening on this in this conflict. So, Yemeni-backed Houthi rebels have confirmed their first attack on Israel since the United States-Israel war on Iran began. The ballistic missile attack that was intercepted by Israel targeted Israel's military sites located in the south of the occupied West Bank, the group says. President Donald Trump says he is very disappointed with NATO's response on the war on Iran. Speaking at a business conference, Trump said, "I've always said NATO is a paper tiger, and I always said we would help, but they'll never help us." Yeah, so we're seeing these divisional lines, guys. Right, I'm jumping onto the chat. Good morning, everyone. Right, I'm at the bottom of the chat now. Hang on, let me jump up, guys. That's quite right. Andrew Rushton is saying Trump is being they won't give up the influence that NATO gives them. I don't think Trump. No, the United States don't need anyone, guys. Really, like NATO is an absolute paper tiger. They don't need anyone. Scottish Lass Jackie saying, "Oh, my message didn't disappear." Right. Guys, I know some people have been messaging me saying that they've been putting messages up on here and they've been disappearing. I don't know why that is. I know that YouTube does censor. I know that YouTube StreamYard, sorry, they do censor for some words. I've no control over that. So sometimes you might have to put a different. You might have to phrase things differently. But I don't have any input on that. I've not put any blocked words, basically. John Darwin is saying the Skull and Bones group have planned this in the 1980s. I do think that this has been planned a long time myself. Yes, I do think this conflict, it's been a long time coming. Ultimately, I think it's going to end with this two world order. That's if the aliens don't come. Googling, James is saying Trump at NATO now. Is he? Hang on, give me a second. I'm not getting anything there. Catalytic Converter is saying I kicked off in the co-op a minute ago. Right, I hope that was just like a figurative thing. Rod Panhard is saying the only thing more dangerous than Trump derangement syndrome is Trump Messiah syndrome. Yeah, have you seen that? They've when they're all praying with their hands on Donald Trump. I just found that a little bit peculiar. Ryan is saying the internet is really good violence subversion. Ulf, we did not have the internet to vent ourselves. The streets would be mayhem. This is a sign the internet is forever. Yeah, do you know what? Actually, as arbitrary as that sounds, one of the things locking people up for internet posts do, it drives them onto the streets. So, and I know this sounds like, I know this is, you know, I know for most people this sounds difficult to, you know, for most people, this sounds okay. So let's just go back to JFK's statement. So JFK did a statement, and he said, "When government, sorry, it might be slightly wrong, but it's more or less this." JFK said, "When governments make peaceful revolution impossible, they make violent revolution inevitable." So when you start locking people up for internet posts, and you know, like Lucy Conley is a perfect example. Like, I don't know. Like if anybody, like, we all know what happened to Lucy Conley, right? Like, that case of Lucy Conley, it's unbelievable. Like, that she got, I mean, she got longer in prison than the Eritrean that sexually assaulted a kid. I'm not making that up, you know. And then we've got the two Manchester gentlemen, who just came back. They've just been on holiday in Pakistan. They had a fight with the police officers. They're probably never going to see the inside of a jail cell. So yeah, you know, like Ryan is saying, when you stop people being able to vent, that steam builds up, right? That steam builds up, and people feel frustrated. You need to give people a vent. When I was in the army, there used to be some high-level venting going off. There used to be some high-level venting going off. Like, yeah, I'm not going to mention how that high-level venting happened. Right, somebody put a question up here. Let me try and find it. There we go. Dude named Brent is saying, first, I know Yemen has been a disaster for a while, but are the citizens of Yemen like the citizens of Iran? And what regime change, or do the citizens support their government? Good question. So as I understand it now, the Houthis are not representative of the Yemeni people. I would say there's a similar situation as Iran, where you've got this regime that's taken over by force, and the people are not particularly happy with it, but they just get go about their daily business. James is saying the United States said they wouldn't hit infrastructure in Iran, but blew up 3 steelworks in Iran yesterday. Yeah, this is a part of this wider. It's like there's like this wider switch and bait, right? You know, people come out and they say, right, this, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do this, and then they do it. You know, so it's very easy to. It's like boots on the ground will happen in Ukraine or Estonia, whenever it happens, however it happens. You know, it doesn't really matter, because we've seen the direction that these things, we've seen the direction that these things take. They're never going to say it. Like for example, with boots on the ground in Ukraine, right? Keir Starmer is never, ever going to stand up in front of Parliament and say, "On my word, unleash hell." He's never going to say that. With people, he just get laughed out the room. He's never going to stand up and say the British government have just authorised a full-scale deployment of all available assets into Eastern Europe to fight the Russians. He's never going to say that. Never. It's going to start with, probably over a weekend, we deployed limited assets to save lives and reinforce NATO's flag, whatever. And then he just builds little by little. If you guys understand the this conflict in the Middle East, it started by, just taking out, the Americans and the Israelis just wanted to take out the Iranian missile production facilities, nuclear plants, and navy. Well, they said they did that in the first couple of hours, and I you know, certainly the Navy, the missiles are a little bit more difficult because that production facility, I would say, is inside a mountain. And I'd say it's always been inside a mountain. And you can't get into mountains with missiles, guys. Doesn't matter how powerful those missiles are. You can't take, well, I guess you can, but it's just not feasible. And then you just expand those airstrikes. Trump is trying to get a third time. What they would actually get is an Obama third term. I don't know what's an Obama third term. Louis Ackers is saying the New World Order. I like to call it the New World Administration. The New World Order, by the World Economic Forum and other various organizations, can... Klaus Schwab's gone now, hasn't he? I think, is it not Tony Blair who's in charge? Silly Gallardi is saying, did you know that Saudi Arabia has signed Yemen and almost 1 million people starved as a result? Do you know that Saudi has signed? Right, am I missing something here? I think I'm missing something. I didn't know that Saudi Arabia has signed Yemen. Is that a typo? And almost 1 million people starved as a result. No, I didn't know that. Right, Rod is saying the UK is the most totalitarian country in the world for internet speech. I wouldn't say it's the worst. You know, I wouldn't say it's the worst, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. It certainly doesn't feel like you. And look, guys, you know what? I don't know where I am with this. On one hand, like you don't want, like if people are calling, let's just say, for example, right? If people want to, if people are calling for other people to be barbecued and grilled and eaten, right? I know that's just wild, right? I know that's wild. But I don't think they should be allowed to call for that. You know, so then where do you draw that line between like letting people say what they want and full scale? I understand this Lucy Conley thing, right? That is for me, that's a perfect example of something that's just bad. Like, there's not a chance, like, not in a million years look, guys, I'm not a legal expert. Not in a million years do I believe Lucy Conley should have been sent to prison. Not a chance. I think it's so absurd. I think the charges against Lucy Conley were so ridiculous. And people look at that. But then you've got to look at the flip side of the coin, right? If people are, you know, openly chanting and talking about how to do I watched this I think they were in America, 2 Muslim men in America, and they were talking about free speech, right? They were talking about freedom in America. And the woman said to these Muslim men, she said, you can't, what are you doing? And then this Muslim guy said, where's my freedom to call for your, you know, where you take the things off? He said, how is that not free speech? If I want people to take your thing off, where's my free speech? And then she said, that's absurd. And he said, yeah, but you need to give it me because it's free speech. And then he said, and then they were talking about freedom. And he says, where's my freedom to dominate you? And I thought, oh God. And it was just such such a different perspective, right? And I was like, oh God, that I totally get it. You know, because some people take your laws and your freedoms and use them against you. And that's what's happening. These laws and these freedoms are absolutely being used against them. So, Sean, I just watched GB News and it said Trump at NATO. I might have misread it. Right. If it comes on and there's something on, I'll throw that out there. Right. I'm jumping down, guys. There's loads of comments. it's all gone wrong is saying, Sean, even you have to watch what you say in case you get banned on here. You can't drink coffee on TikTok. Yeah, it is. It's strange times. I'm not even allowed to drink coffee on TikTok. Where are we? Yeah, how's that like? Yeah, that's ridiculous. Siligaladi is saying there's lots of plane sounds here. I think that's what she means. I think she missed an E off the end. Lots of plane sounds here, and I don't think it's people going on holiday. Well, it might be. It's the Easter holidays, right? But no, I understand. Oh, we've got some biblical text, right, guys? Can we not spam the biblical text? I know you've not spammed it, but if there's people on here about to spam biblical text, just don't. Samuel 26:9. Do not destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed be guiltless? Well, there you go. There you go. Sean, do you know how high and mountainous the coastline of Iran is on the Strait of Hormuz? I don't know the exact numbers. How high those mountains are. But if you guys think of the Strait of Hormuz, you know, where it goes up and you've got like Dubai and what have you. On the Iranian side, it's like a bowl. It's like a mountainous bowl. I don't know. I know it's very mountainous. I don't know the exact numbers. Right, listen, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to this because there has been breaking news in the last 24 hours. The conflict in the Middle East has dragged in, for at least what we can understand, the Yemenis. There was Yemeni missile strikes onto Israel last night, and what that means is, first of all, that's another country now involved. And, you know, the only way that you can deal with this is ultimately boots on the ground. You know, you can't stop those missiles. Look, we've seen, right? You guys have seen and witnessed firsthand with all the might, you know, with all the might of the US military, their regional allies, Israel, the Iranians are still firing missiles, right? So it's been, what, 4 weeks almost? Yeah, 4 weeks today. Yeah, exactly. Was it? 28 days, 28 days. So it's been, you know, it's, yeah, literally a month. It's the 28th. So we understand that you can't do this by the air, right? You can't do this by the air. So to stop the Yemenis, or the Houthi rebels, I guess, to stop that happening, you have to have boots on the ground. Now, the Israelis don't have the legs to do that. That's nothing against, you know, the Israelis. They just don't have the hardware to get their kit and equipment to Yemen. They don't have it. They don't have it. You know, they could do a huge land move, but that's going to be, you know, that's going to have its own, you know, that's going to take time. People will see where that's coming from. And it's, you know, it's going to take time. And the Yemenis will see this. They'll start using long range missile strikes. They can't come by the sea because they don't have the capacity. The United States don't have the manpower, you know, and they have, the United States have the manpower to take Iran, but they don't have the manpower to take Iran and Yemen as well, guys. It's just not going to work. So physically, I don't know how you would do this. You know, I don't know how you would do this. Like militarily, yes, the United States can 100% go into Iran and, you know, overtake Iran by force, 100%. They can't do that and Yemen at the same time. It's too much. They don't have the manpower. So the options there are potentially a military draft in the United States, some sort of conscription, because they're going to need more men. Now, if the Israelis were to do this, they would have to have one hell of a road move through Israel, through Jordan a little bit, through Saudi Arabia. It's just not going to happen, guys. That type of a road move, it's just not going to happen. So how do you get those boots on the ground in Yemen? Virtually impossible. And what I'm going to speculate right now is that very soon we are going to see Somalia join this conflict. Very soon, I think Somalia's almost split up into like maybe 3 regions. So you've got like the northeastern region of Somalia. That's more or less like Somaliland. I think they will get involved very soon, guys. There's a lot of incentive for them financially. There's a lot of incentive for them to get involved because you've got those shipping lanes from, I guess, it's not just from China. It's from China, from India, all the cheap stuff that we get from China, from India, I guess even Pakistan, Bangladesh. All these clothes that we get, that we get printed in, what is it? Go on. Primark. Look at the colours. Look at the colours of your Primark clothes. It all comes from Bangladesh or Pakistan, where the labour's cheap. Then they get this stuff on a shipping route and they send it through the Suez Canal, through the Gulf, through the Arabian Sea, Gulf of Aden, Red Sea, Suez Canal, onto the Mediterranean and into Europe. Looks like that shipping lane's pretty much closed now. So there really isn't any way to stop the Houthis firing these missiles without boots on the ground. We know this. We know this because the the Israelis and the Americans they've been putting all the might of the US Air Force into Iran, and the Iranians are still firing missiles. So we know that you can't do this by the air, right? So if you're joining for the first time, guys, we're talking about the news, which is gonna be seismic. When the markets open, let me have a look. Let me Google quick what the oil price is. I bet the oil, in fact, it will have. I know the oil price must have spiked, and it's going to spike again on Monday. Yeah, Trump loses power over markets as oil price jumps again and stocks plunge. Let me try and get this on Forex. I want a chart. Oil price chart. Yeah, so it's I think it's trading at the moment. It looks like I can't be bothered to click on it. It's just, I think it's the highest point. Yeah, I think it's highest point so far since the conflict started. Right now, that's where it's trading. Right, so if you're joining for the first time, guys, okay, the Houthis in Yemen have confirmed they've launched an attack against Israel. This will be the first of many. Remember, once you start doing these things, you start slow, so it doesn't get the big, so it doesn't get the big outcry, and it doesn't get the big political military response. You start slow, and then you literally, you just build this up over time. So the Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen, the Houthis, they have confirmed they have attacked Israel for the first time since the start of this conflict. The group says it fired a barrage of ballistic missiles targeting sensitive Israeli sites in response to the targeting of Iran, Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine territories. It adds that its operations will continue until the aggression on all fronts ends. Now, the Israeli Defense Force have claimed that they've intercepted any and all missiles from Yemen. However, the significance of this is that now there's another country involved. So it's not just missiles coming from Iran. You've now got the Houthis, and the Houthis control of the Suez Canal. And I get it that the Houthis don't. So when I say the Houthis control the Suez Canal, what I mean is the Houthis control the strip. I can't pronounce its name. I always forget it. The Djibouti. I'm going to call it the Djibouti Strait. I know it's not called the Djibouti Strait, but the shipping lane between Djibouti and Yemen. It's like, if you guys think that the Strait of Hormuz is a choke point, the Djibouti Strait, that is it's a smaller choke point, right? And that means that all cargo ships now have to either do as they're told by the Houthis or reroute around Africa. And that's going to be very expensive. It's going to take a lot more time, and that is going to, we are so reliant and custom in the United Kingdom to these cheap goods made in China, made in India, made in Pakistan, made in Bangladesh. And this also, and I was watching these footsteps, when Donald Trump was bringing back manufacturing to the United States, I was like, yeah, he's bringing back manufacturing to the United States because there's going to be a global conflict on an industrial scale, and they need all that industry back, because Donald Trump knew exactly, he knew exactly what was coming. So attacks did continue. Overnight on Iran. Missile strikes have been taking place overnight in the Iranian capital of Tehran, while Iran has continued to fire at Israel and countries across the Gulf region. So here's a quick roundup, guys, from the BBC. Israeli ambulance service says a 52-year-old man died. Several others were injured after a missile was fired towards central Israel late Friday. The IDF says missiles fired from Yemen were intercepted. Foreign workers were injured. 2 drones targeted the port of Salalah in the south of Oman. I mentioned Salalah. So Salalah. So if you guys don't know, Salalah is the biggest safe port in that region that it's not safe anymore, right? It's the biggest safe port. If you're shipping manpower into Oman, into the Middle East, you need to send it close, don't you? But you need to send it somewhere that's close and safe, because you don't want your ships getting blown up. So you need to send it to the closest safe place. For example, in the before the invasion of Iraq, there was a huge military buildup in Kuwait, right? And that was the closest, and it was very easy. You could get all your stuff by sea into Kuwait, then drive it up to the border, and then cross the border. It's a little bit more tricky. It's a little bit more tricky with with Iran, because there's no friendly countries that are bordering. You can't get anything by sea into Iraq, and Iraq, I would say, is not a friendly country anymore. They're not going to allow that. There's too many rebels. Not a chance with Pakistan from the north. You're not going to do it from the north either. So you need to take Iran from that south coast. Right, I'm jumping down, guys. I'm jumping down. Dude named Brent is saying, okay, don't think of America as a country. It's more like a corporation. When the stock markets go down, rich people complain and they get the results more than young people are protesting. The whole world is corporations now. Hertzman is saying, by way of deception, thou shalt do war. Motto of Israeli intelligence service, Mossad. I think that is I think deception is is a huge weapon of war. Project C5G is saying Iran mobilized 1 million. BS story, they're all hiding and sending kids to defend the checkpoints. Yeah, we spoke about this yesterday. They're recruiting, well, they are children, yeah. They're recruiting children as young as 12 now for they're not calling it military service, but they're calling it like military assistance or something. But where's that line drawn between, like, right, okay, so you're patrolling a street for safety with your AK-47 or 74, whatever they're rolling with. At what point does that turn into combat? David King is saying Salawaka kebabs are nice. I love Middle Eastern food. I do. I think Middle Eastern food's fantastic. Lewis Ackers is saying the US Navy in the region is swizzle. They're in range of Yemen, Iran, and other backed countries. Yes, I agree. And with cheap drones, these ones with the fixed wings, all these ships are now targets. And it's like, in the old, well, I guess old, like in the, like, you know, in the Second World War, the naval battles, they were ships on ships, right? They were ships on ships. Now naval battles are ships being attacked by drones. So, like, how many times have I said asymmetric naval warfare? How many times have I said that? Like, there's not going to be a ship-on-ship battle. You would be a buffoon. Like, you would be a buffoon to think your Navy could stand up to the US Navy. You would be an absolute buffoon to think that your Navy can stand up to the US Navy. Now, the problems here is, I don't think the US Navy. I don't think the US Navy understand. They've got to. They're smart guys. But now what you've got is this very strange situation where you can have cheap drones, the fixed wing type, Shahed types, that are attacking these naval assets, right? And the Navy can't attack back. So now you've got all these expensive ships sat in the middle of the ocean, you know, and these cheap, low-flying drones are, you know, just coming to attack them. David King is saying, I heard 6 US landing craft sunk in the United Arab Emirates. I've not heard of that, but I'll try and find it. Siligalada is saying, using children as human shields. Where did I hear about that? I wonder. So for those of you guys who don't know what a human shield is, it's literally, you know. Okay, so we've heard about this missile strike on the school, right? Now, look, I'll be quite clear. I've got no inside information on what's happening in Iran, what actually got hit. What I will say is there's no military significance in taking out kids, right? There's nothing. So in those early stages, right, you are always going to target air defenses. That's what you always target. Like, your first wave has to target air defenses, right? Like, it makes no sense. Let's just go down this road, right? And let's just say that, you know, Trump and Netanyahu are like, right, let's blow as many schools up as possible, right? Let's just go with that. If they wanted to blow as many schools up as possible, they need to take out the air defense, right? Because if they just get giddy and go start taking out the schools, then the Iranian air defense is going to take all their airplanes down, and they won't have the ability to take as many schools out as possible, right? So your initial waves always focus on air defense. There's no caveat to that, guys. Your initial waves are always taking out air defense. Now, this particular school was taken out in the first wave, right? So straight away, I'm thinking there was some air defense there. I know from experience, right? Because I know. In fact, you guys, if anybody's been to school, you guys know from experience as well. Schools normally have a playing field, right? They do. They normally have their government building. They have playing fields, and they have buildings, right? That's a school, yeah. So it's a government building with a perimeter, a school perimeter, fence or a wall. A lot of schools in the Middle East have these white. Anyway, doesn't matter. With a perimeter. So you can quite easily put air defense systems in school playgrounds, and then the crew for that air defense system, they're in the school building. And that's just what happens, guys. Okay, that is literally just what happens. It's like it happens all the time. So when you see these images, these reports, and I've not seen anything that confirms anything, of schools being hit, it's normally because there's something like, there's a weapon system in that playground. And like Silly Gallardi is saying, you can use human shields by just saying, yeah, we've got our soldiers in and amongst children and civilian population. Paddock Boozehammer. Hello, Padlock and Boozehammer. What a fantastic name, Padlock Boozehammer is saying. They don't have a $30 trillion economy. I don't know what that's in response to. I think I don't know what that's in response to, but not many countries do. I think you're saying the United States have a 30. Oh, hang on a minute. Right, let me get your other comments, Paddock. Right. They have a $20,000 drone. We have 2 million rockets. It's proportional. Okay. So I've spoke about this quite a few times. It's not, right. Okay. It's not the finances. It's not the money. It's not the money. So we're talking about, they're not $20,000. They're more than $20,000, but I understand what you're talking about. It's to production, right? It's to production. These expensive rockets, these expensive interceptors, they take time to build. They have huge interconnected supply chains. So, for example, the electronic components, they may be built in Japan. The warhead may be built in Europe. The bodies may be built in, I don't know, in another country. And then all those parts are then shipped potentially to the United States, and then they're put together in the United States with other parts that are built in the United States. Now, if one link in this chain fails, that whole $2 million rocket becomes worthless because you just can't get them. You can't get them. Maybe it's not, maybe it's not the rocket that's vulnerable. Maybe the rocket is dependent contractually on, I don't know, something ridiculous like a threaded bolt, this bolt that's threaded a certain way. I'm making it up, and this bolt that's threaded in a certain way, there's only one factory that can produce that bolt. Now, that factory that produced that bolt, that's not a military factory. That's just a bolt factory. That's very easy to go and destroy. So now that factory that provides the bolts for the $2 million missile, You can't get that because it's just been somebody's destroyed the bolt making machine. You guys know what I'm going around. It could be a resistor, it could be a little circuit board, it could be something very small on one of these rockets that you just can't get. So it's not the money. So it's not that, you know, it's not the money. It's the production time and the upstream, downstream components, right? Whereas these cheap drones, they are being built fully, everything, because they're cheap. You know, they're being built fully in Iran and used by the Iranians. So the Iranians have a more or less, you know, unlimited supply. You know, unlimited supply of those drones. I would say everything. Yeah, I'd say everything's produced in Iran because they're cheap. They don't have those big supply chains to build them. Right, hang on a minute. John Darwin is saying the United States is prepared for an asymmetrical war. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced they're prepared for an asymmetric naval war. Right, I'm jumping to the bottom, guys, so I apologize again if I'm missing anyone's comments. Debatable Lands is saying when the Ruhr Dam was bombed, the Germans had factories up and running 3 days later. Yeah, but it was a fantastic raid, right? It was what Debatable Lands is talking about is the Dam Busters raid. Well, I mean, yeah, I understand it didn't, you know, they were up and running, you know, pretty soon afterwards. But what a fantastic mission! What a fantastic mission! What type of supply chain does Iran have right now, Russia? What type of supply chain does Iran have right now, Russia? Okay, so yes, I think what you're saying there is Iran's supply chain will be heavily dependent on Russia, and you know I believe the Russians will be helping, as well. I believe the Chinese will be helping because all these countries have land corridors. You know, there's land corridors to these countries, so you know it's through allies. You know, you can get things into Iran by road from Russia, by road from China. You know, China, it's, you know, you have to go through maybe like Afghanistan to Iran, maybe, or maybe like Turkmenistan to Iran. So all those Stan areas, China can ship through there. For the Russians, they literally just come through the, I guess they'd come through the Caspian Sea, right? The Russians would literally just ship through the Caspian Sea. Is it the Caspian Sea? Yeah, the Caspian Sea. Yeah, so for the Russians, through maybe like Kazakhstan or something, through the Caspian Sea to Iran. So the Iranians will be getting stuff from, look, guys, I'm just speculating, from China and Russia. And when you think that they've got that open supply route through their allies, remember, guys, okay, when we talk about China in this conflict, if I was the Chinese, and I'm not, I would just sit this one out. I would say, right, okay, I'll let everybody else destroy themselves, and I will just keep building and building, and I'll supply both sides. You know, I'll supply both sides. You know, you might laugh at this, but when I was in the military, you used to get these radios. I think the personal radio, it was called a 149. This was before the Bowman set came in, or whatever they've got now. I think it's called the 149. This was like in the 90s, right? And it was absolutely useless. Absolutely useless. Like it was so ridiculous. It was embarrassing, right? So we used to have these like radios, and you used to have like a throat mic on, and like this massive sucking ear piece that nobody used to have there. They used to, like, you put it on your kit. So do you know what people did? They just bought cheap radios from China for like 20 quid. And that's how people used to operate in the military. So yes, the British military, you know, this is the British military. So we're talking about supply chains, right? So we had this very expensive radio that was supposed to be fantastic and encrypted. It just didn't work. It did not work. So what people used to do is they used to just buy their own radios because the ones that you get issued didn't work. So you buy your own radios, right? And you would say, right, okay, we don't send anything sensitive over, you know, but everybody did. Kev Mills is saying, community strongholds, self-defense and safety in the community being organized across the UK now. Join a growing team of organizers and help keep yourself and community safe. I think we need the, you know, we need the First Republic of Cleethorpes. Steve T is saying, isn't the prophecy of Megiddo when the armies of the East come through the valley, it's all over? Yeah, so we're talking here about the Battle of Armageddon on Mount Megiddo, which, as I understand, is in southern, I think it's in southern Israel, or current day southern Israel, obviously. Right, I'm jumping to the bottom, guys. John Darwin is saying, Sean, you worded it in a way that that Padlock Boozehammer should be able to understand. Ah, right. When we was talking about drones and stuff, yeah, yeah. So when we talk about drones, guys, it's not about money. You can print more money. You can print more money. If you think about these, like, I don't know, Tomahawks and Patriot missiles, you can't, doesn't matter, right? So, like, a lot of these components come from Taiwan, right? A lot of these components these chips and these superconductors, they come from Taiwan. Very soon, Taiwan's going to run out of fuel. They're not going to be able to produce anymore. So now, all these expensive rockets, doesn't matter how much they cost, if you can't get the components, they ain't working. Silly Gallardi is saying the story of Armageddon is in the New Testament. The Jews don't believe it. Right, I don't have enough information to be able to comment on that, guys. I don't really know that much about my biblical scripture. Ari Redacted is saying, take a look at the capital city of Kazakhstan, believed to be the next ruling capital city of this planet, and they have 1,000 nukes and one of the largest oil reserves. Right, listen, ladies and it's in northern Israel. Sorry. So Mount Megiddo is in northern Israel, and Mount Megiddo is where allegedly the Battle of Armageddon was is to be fought. One Day Ago says MOD procurement contracts they are ridiculous, guys. They are ridiculous. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Right, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to start to close this down now. The breaking news of the day is the global crisis. The Yemenis have fired ballistic missiles at Israel. So that's another country opening up. And unfortunate, well, it's not unfortunate. I guess it's not unfortunate, but it's just the way it is, right? The Israelis don't have the hardware to have a ground assault force into Yemen. The Americans don't have the manpower to fight two conflicts simultaneously. So it does look like that this development is going to drag more and more assets into that region. And if you live in the United Kingdom, this is just going to be another dividing line now, because the Yemeni community are now going to be, pro, they're going to be, involved, because that's what's coming into the United Kingdom, guys. Yeah, don't forget, if you're on, guys, make sure you hit those buttons to like, comment, subscribe, share, all those things that help this channel grow. I am going to close this down now. I'm trying to do a UFO video, an aliens UAP thing, and talk about these pyramids. But every time Every time I go to do it, something else happens. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for hanging out with me this morning. I bid you good morning. I'll see you guys later.